this, it was doing things.
There's a really bad joke in there somewhere, darling.
I know.
Really bad.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that out loud.
I'm gonna work on that in my head all day now.
Anyway, as I was saying, my name is Mark Nesbitt, and this is Patty Wilson. And she and I are co-authors on a number of books and on the paranormal, and also co-investigators. And between the two of us, we have pretty close to, if not more than 30 years of investigating. And a number of years of that together doing our investigations. And so what we decided to do today is give you some of the highlights of those investigations. How many of you have been on a paranormal investigation? Ah, perfect, good. And what the other thing I did is not only to the, or we're going to speak to the investigations, I brought along some of the better EVP that we've got. Now, last 2 weeks ago, I was in the Mansfield State Penitentiary. Okay, not as an inmate. Right, but they have, and they just released me, so that 20 years ago. But I gave a talk with EVP, and one of the things I usually do is do a transcript, because sometimes it's hard to understand. Well, I realized that they were having more fun figuring it out than me showing them what it is. So that's what we're going to do today. I didn't bring a transcript, I didn't bring anything to show you what they're saying. I'll leave that up to you. And it's also interesting for me too, because we all go into these things with a little bit of our own prejudices, and of course we all hear different things. So I'll play these things for you as they come up, and play them 2 or 3 times. I'd be interested in your input, what you think, because it could be completely different from what I'm hearing. So at any rate, one of the places that we had an opportunity to investigate is the Gettysburg Northern Engine House. And this is out on the first phase battlefield. It is a modern construction, modern meaning 1980s. And yet we kept hearing rumors about weird things that were happening out there from the railroaders. And the railroaders they don't like to talk about it too much because they're afraid you're going to think they're crazy. And I'm interviewing them one day and asking them questions about what had happened out there. And they're all looking at each other, and I'm thinking, this is going nowhere. And finally, one of them pipes up. He says, "You know the wooden stairs over there? One day I was here and I heard footsteps go up the stairs, and I looked and there was nobody there. All of a sudden, the railroader next to him snatched him and said, 'You heard those too?' They weren't even talking to each other about it because they didn't want to, make anybody think they were crazy or anything. So we got permission. In fact, how many times did we investigate?
Oh my gosh, at least a good dozen.
Oh, easily, yeah, easily a dozen. It's you have to get special permission. In fact, we probably can't even get in there anymore because the guy that we were talking to has left the railroad. But ever since 9/11, it's federal and it's just hard to get in. But a couple of the things that we did. Now, Patty was the one that I relied on in these situations because she's a medium, and she hears things. Well, go ahead, explain what you do.
Okay, so I basically tell everybody I bird dog for him. It's basically what I do. So I hear and see what's going on, and then kind of help guide where the EVP is going. Make sure that like if they want to talk about a specific subject, then I might whisper, Mark, they want to talk about blah blah blah. Ask a question on blah blah blah. So that's part of what I do. I'm also an investigator. I've been investigating for 20 some years. So we just kind of somehow naturally it just sort of works for us. So I'll just kind of guide it along, and sometimes I'll hear stuff they're saying and pursue that line of questioning a little further because Mark might have decided to stop and go on to a new subject, not knowing they're like wanting to continue down the same path further. So I might whisper, Mark, I want to talk about blah blah blah. Ask a little more about this or whatever. So together, with a couple other people throughout time. We've worked that site quite frequently. And I think that's where we met Miss Emma, which is our.
That's right, that's right. And I need somebody like Patty because I am a psychic brick. I'll get anything, okay? You know, I'm just, walking around and, you know, there are all around me and I don't even know it. But, so this is one entity that we ran into. We ran into two female entities that gave us their names, Emma and Tilly. And they were pretty, Emma was a pretty powerful personality. And when we were doing EVP, it was one of those things where you ask a question and when you play it back, it's so loud you can't even make out what they're saying. So this one, and Patty was telling me, ask her to be quiet a little bit. So I did, and this is what we got.
When you're talking to us, if you be a little more quiet, I know it's difficult to do it, but you're a little bit loud. If you talk a little more softly, and I'll be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma. Loud, if you can talk a little more softly, and I'll be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma.
Here?
Yeah, well, yeah. If you can talk a little more softly, and I'll be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, well, yeah.
So that is kind of interesting because that was one of those things where we asked, a request. She actually said, I'll be quiet. And then the next one, I don't even know if because I seem to have caught this just recently. Here's another one from one of the ladies there.
Oh, that was Tilly, talking for, Tilly.
Yes, where someone was.
Hey, we just wanted to know, is Jim with you right now?
Okay, that was yes, but what? A little later.
Hey, we just wanted to know, is Jim with you right now? Or is Jim with you right now? Or is Jim with you right now?
Is with me.
So Tilly was quite a character. First time I met her, I have to tell you, this was her exact words. I said, who are you? She said, I worked for the railroad before this place was here, and I ran it. And she said, and then she laughed and she said, you just tell them I'm a tough old broad. And I started to laugh and he's like, what? And I said, she's a tough old broad. And he looked at me because I don't talk about spirit that way very often. And I'm like, no, seriously, that's what she said, not me. And I just fell in love with this particular person. And I've gotten along with her ever since. And I've had a lot of experiences. We've had a lot of experiences with Tilly since then. She's quite a character, very vocal, willing to tell you anything. And she speaks her mind all the time. And that was with Jim. That was one of the other spirits we'd encountered, and we asked what had happened to him, and that's when she said, he's with me.
And then here's another one. When we first got there, apparently, I don't remember doing an investigation in the morning, but maybe
I think it was late when we were doing the weekend.
Okay, maybe it was her, but this is another one.
Hey, Mark, and your friend Patty here, will you talk to us? Talk to us?
Wait a minute. Let me do that one more time, and I'll.
Hey, Mark, and your friend Patty here, will you talk to us? To us? Talk to us?
Think anything out of that? It's a little tougher.
First time it sounded like I will or something like that.
I heard, after I asked, will you talk to me, I hear, if I can, good morning.
Mhm.
Oh,
Okay, one more time for you.
Yeah.
See, I thought it said afraid not.
Talk to us?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, yeah.
And, you know, it's very difficult when you stop and think that they're communicating without a voice box. This is decomposed.
Yeah.
Years and
Was
years.
that, I missed the beginning, was that with like just a regular recorder?
Yeah, well, a digital,
Yeah, digital.
TR60, which is the old mic
Yeah,
that I use.
The old ones are the best.
They are deep.
Yeah, but, let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, the Cashtown Inn.
All right.
Cashtown
Is there
Inn,
next one?
yeah, one of my favorite places, and, this is one of those situations where Patty and I were working really well together. And, she felt that there was a Confederate soldier, she was a Confederate soldier down here, and I always liked, when I tried to get EVP, I always like to address someone. I said, do you have a name? Which I do all the time, right?
Yeah.
And she said, I think his name is Andrew. I said, okay, so I'll see what I do. I said, Andrew, what state are you from? You know, when you're talking to soldiers, you try and get, especially Civil War soldiers, state, a number, because that'll be their regimental number, second Mississippi, first, whatever. The company, if you can, those are letters, A through G, I guess. So that's what I tried to do. I asked them what, and this will be easy for you, but this is the other thing you do when you want to try and interpret it is break it into syllables. Do we have 2 syllables, 3 syllables? That'll help you a little bit. So I'll go ahead. Maybe 2 out.
Andrew, what state are you from?
Play it one more time. Remember, it's a southern state, so that narrows it down, okay?
Andrew, what state are you from? From,
You got it.
from,
Mississippi.
That's pretty clear
Yeah.
for being EVP. And of course, we've been out to the Cashtown Inn so many times. In fact, that's the only one I have of it. I'm surprised. But the Cashtown Inn is a wonderful place. We ran into M's.
M's in the basement. Like everybody thinks all the ghosts in Gettysburg are all Civil War era, but they're not. Realistically, they're just not. So down in the very basement of the Cashtown, we ran across a woman who told me her name was Emmett, and we called her M, and she was from the colonial period, and she was hiding down there because she thought the Indians were still coming to get her. So she was very frightened at first. She kept telling us to be quiet, because she didn't want any attention drawn to her place, and it was her and her little boy, and over the course of time, we got to talk to her quite frequently after we convinced her that was gone, that period of time was over, she was safe, and then she started to be willing to talk to us, and she became kind of a favorite. We could almost count on her almost every time we went there to give us something.
And in fact, one time when we were down there, we were down in the basement, and I liked it down there because there's always water down there, flowing water through the basement. And someone had, I guess it was a K2, yeah, K2 meter.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that have all the lights on the top. And I was trying to explain to the little girl, the guy was holding it down here, I said, go over and touch that. You make the lights go on. They won't hurt you because, you know, back in those days, the only light they knew was fire.
Right.
I said, you can touch those, they're cool, they won't burn you. So just go on, and all of a sudden, they went boop, up and back down. And I can't use that EVP because I think I said something like, holy, did you guys see that? So at any rate, that was one of the interesting things that we had. We did one without Patty in the hotel vault, but we'll get back to a couple that we did. And the Gettysburg Hotel, are you familiar with that? It's the big one on the square. Mm-hmm. They have a ballroom in the back, and there's a vault in there. And I thought, what a great opportunity a lot of people think EVP is radio waves, okay? Well, here's a ball. The walls are 6 feet thick. So I go in the ball, and I was with Lane that time, and we were getting EVP in this ball. And one of the things, and I even forget what this says, but it's really good. I'd like you to hear it. I got a name in there, and let's see if you guys can make it out.
Okay, quiet now, we talking. Well?
Mary?
Yeah, Mary, yeah.
Yeah, I was asking, is it Will? Because that was somebody that we've been getting before, but apparently it was Mary.
So Carol and I had an interesting experience with Mary. After everything happened with Lane, a couple weeks later, I came down to visit, and Carol, his wife, and I went over to see if I would pick up anything. And I was up on the second floor with Carol, and I kept seeing the spirit in this woman, and she kept going like sticking her hands in my face and like, what are you doing? And then I would back up a little, and then I said, she keeps saying, you can see me, like it's a miracle or something. Well, it turned out Lainey could only hear at the time. She wasn't able to see them, and so she was fascinated that the next one they brought over could see. Because I'm like, well, this is what she looks like, and I'm describing her, and then she starts sticking her hand in my face, and I kept juking away from it, and Carol started to laugh, and she's like, that's because Lainey couldn't see her, she could only hear her. So she was fascinated with the fact that we were different, we could have different abilities.
It's also interesting that two separate investigations, weeks apart, came up with the same name,
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
woman. That's always, and it tells you a lot about, every little piece that we can get about spirits. It's great because you can eventually put them all together. And we know because of our building, which I'll get to here in a second, that we have certain resident spirits. They're there all the time, and you can talk to them anytime you want. And other spirits that come in and out, like we have a priest that apparently showed up periodically. We know that historically speaking, the downstairs was used by Confederate soldiers, probably Georgians, okay, because that's who occupied Gettysburg, that area of Gettysburg at the time of the battle. But there was a priest that came in, and a radio DJ from New York, I guess, wherever that was from. Harrisburg, yeah, he was with Radio Pennsylvania. Came in, he called up, got an interview with me, and he came in. And little did I know it, but he was a total skeptic, complete total. And he was, I think in the back of his mind, he was thinking, I'm going to catch this guy. So we're walking around, and he was asking me questions. He says, come on, it behooves you to have ghosts here, right? Because you make your money at this. I said, yeah, but I'm fascinated by this stuff. It's driving me crazy. I don't know what this is. I want to know. And we're talking about EVP, and he knows all about radio and that kind of stuff, and I agree. And so we went upstairs, and he said, I said, sometimes there's a priest here, so he said, okay, let's try something. And he But, yeah, there was one time when, I don't know if it was, somebody came downstairs. They were like, Mrs. K's in it. And it just, I always call her Mrs. K's, you know.
I call it.
Yeah.
She's in. And, I said, what's the matter? She says there's this little Italian woman in her kitchen, okay? Little Italian woman in her kitchen, and she wants you to get her out. I'm like, me? I can't even, you know, I can't see her or anything. She says, it's your house, you gotta get her out. Well, previous to that, we'd had a group in, and apparently the little Italian lady had come in with someone from that group, okay, and stayed, which happens, you know? All right, so I went up to the kitchen. I said, ma'am, I'm sorry, you're upsetting Mrs. Kitzmiller, you're gonna have to leave. I mean, my head is going, where do I feel stupid? You're all alone, talking to the wall. So you gotta leave, I'm sorry. I walked downstairs. I said, well, I guess I took care of it. I don't know. I went up there and talked. So, and all of a sudden, another medium that we use, Julie, came walking in the door, and she's got this look on her face, and she looks at me, she says, who's that little Italian woman standing on the corner? I'm like, it worked. It worked. So 2 mediums actually, you know, helped me get rid of her. I don't know where she is anymore, poor lady.
Send her to a different house.
I guess. And one of the other things that happened is that whenever we would have groups over, Mrs. Kitzmiller would get angry because we were supposed to, like they did in the good old days, Victorian time, we were supposed to have tea and cookies for her. And we never, you know,
Yeah.
we forgot about it. Or I was trying to explain to her, we need a license for that, you know, we can't. But, so one day, Carol found these in the, they had to be 10 years old, these cookies in the, and she put a bowl down there, put these cookies in, her and Mrs. Kessler, I don't like that. So we got the group up, we got her in the back room, and, well, you'll hear what she said.
Mrs. Kitzmiller, I understand you didn't like our little tiny cookies the other night. You don't like those? I understand you. I understand you like the larger. You don't like those? I understand. I understand you like the what? I understand you like the larger. I understand you like the larger cookies.
That takes a little time to get down, but that's the only thing I could figure that, or she said I ate them, but that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, she ate them.
Very familiar with Mrs. Kitzmiller.
What's that?
So I'm very familiar with Mrs. Kitzmiller because we've been up there with Kayla.
Okay, yeah.
And she calls her Mrs. K. And we try to call her Mrs. K. And she's like, it's Mrs. Kitzmiller. Sorry.
Yeah, see?
But we did get to go back in the back bedroom. And I had about a half-hour conversation with her husband on the Phasma box talking about beers and stouts and lagers.
Ah, okay.
So he took to me right away.
Another EVP that I had now, Mrs. Kitzmiller outlived virtually her whole family. And they lived there from 1866 to 1924. So she was there, and she asked, her husband died before her, okay? And I asked her, this to give you an idea of how she thinks. I asked her, I says, Mrs. Kitzmiller, were you sad when David died? And I played it back, and you hear me ask the question, and you hear a female voice go, no.
And it was, like I said, him and I hit on my name was David too.
Oh,
And
okay.
then we started talking about Irish beer, like Guinness. Oh, he's a big Guinness fan.
Now, I had some strange sounds. It's not always sometimes it's a little different voice that you get, and this is one that I got there, up there, and you'll hear it, actually hear it twice, because I got it a second time in consecutive recordings.
Soldiers from Georgia, are you here? Is anyone wounded here? Have you ever been to a lab?
Right there. It's different from any of the other voices.
Been to a lab?
I've listened to this 100 times. I don't know what they're saying, but it's very weird voice. Okay. And then that was recording 005. This is 006.
Wounded soldier from Georgia, where were you wounded? What year is it? Are you in pain?
That sounds like 6 bodies here.
What's that?
There's some,
Sounds like 6 bodies here.
yeah,
Oh, now you've done it.
I'm sorry.
Now I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'll listen to that one more time if you don't mind, because I haven't been able to figure it out, but it's a whole different voice.
I do hear something like here at the back.
Yeah, but.
Sounds like 6 bodies
See, this is
here.
why it's good. Okay, all right, here.
Pain?
Yeah,
That sound like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
When you asked if he was in pain.
Yeah, 6 bodies here. Ooh. One other quick one here, and then we'll go into to yours. This was, I'm trying to get a name once again.
Jeremy, would you like to talk with us? I know you might be a little bit tired. Come on, use our energy and talk with us, please. If you're not here, we need to talk with us too. If you're not here, we need to talk with us too. If you're not here, we need to talk with us too.
I'm Robert.
If you're not here, we need to talk with us too.
yeah.
Yeah,
First I thought it said Kurt Roberts.
If you're a child, can you spell your name?
It does say Robert.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'm trying to talk with them and Jeremy. And then, I don't know, for some reason, he said, if you're not Jeremy, will you talk to me? And he said, I'm Robert. Of course, I didn't hear that. If you probably weren't there, as you would have said, he's Robert. All right, last few here, which are really remarkable. This is Patty's crew.
Let's do Iverson.
Okay. You want to set it up?
Certainly. So, my group several years ago just came down to spend the day in Gettysburg. And, there's a field, in one area of Gettysburg called Iverson's Pit, where, it was the Iverson's men were basically massacred. And they said the only place during the battle that blood literally ran down the cornrows and rivulets. So we're there, and it's just getting on like dusk. And at the time, the park was shutting down at dusk. So I walked over to one of the ladies in my group, who's the one who caught this. And she was one of those EVP people that like literally showered with the doggone thing on. I mean, seriously, she always had the thing running. So she's over there, she's off by herself in the distance. And I tried to get her attention, couldn't. So I walked over and I said to her, it's time to go. And she turned around and looked at me, she had tears in her eyes. And she said, I want to say a prayer for them. And she stopped for a few seconds and came toward me, and we went to the cars to get in the cars, and we go down the road maybe, I don't know, mile and a half, and she's in front of us. She's frantically, like her lights are on, and she's frantically pointing like she's going to out of the car window to get over. So we pull over thinking something's wrong with her car, and she jumps out of the car and she said, listen, and this is what she had captured. So that's her voice saying, God be with you. And then you hear, I did not hear it at all at the time. Nobody else recorded it either.
Yeah.
So it was a very poignant EVP.
And that was one of the things, that was one of the first identified haunted places on the battlefield in the 1870s, right after they exhumed the bodies. Farmer Forney's workers said, we're not working out there anymore. We're hearing screams, we're hearing yells, we're hearing orders shot, we're hearing guns, bugles. We're done working out there. So
Was that, did they also, like, when they were found, this is one of the stories I heard about that, is that blue mist came out of the ground? Is that like just folklore?
No, but there are worse. I have several accounts where burials were taking place, and there were fresh burials, and people saw blue lights, they call it, coming out of the ground. Now, today we'd say, oh, it's just swamp gas or methane, but
Yeah.
this was, they were convinced that it was the souls of the dead. Captain Phillips?
Okay, so there is a place not far from where I live, and it's called Captain Phillips Monument. Basically what happened is, during the French and Indian period, a gentleman by the name of Colonel Piper asked a group of farmers from the area, led by Captain Phillips. Now, that sounds military, but please remember they were civilian militias. They were farmers and tradesmen and what have you, to go into Woodcock Valley near what's now Saxton and protect the farmers there while they tried to harvest their crops because the Indians were killing them in the fields. And so he marches into Woodcock Valley with his 14-year-old son and 8 other men. They get halfway up the valley, realize all the whites are gone. They've fled because they're afraid they're going to be killed. It's getting dusk. He makes a fateful decision to, instead of walk back out of the valley in the dark where he might bump into something or someone, to take refuge in one of the cabins. The following morning, he wakes up and there are Indians all around the cabin. They don't know he and his men are inside, but the natives are curious. They're exploring the empty barn and all this different stuff. There's 2 white men with them who speak French and English. Phillips orders complete silence. Now you have to understand they would have not windows, but little ports, about this big gun ports that they could shoot out of. He's watching through one of them. And at some point, they get very, very close to the cabin, and one of his men loses their nerve and they open fire. At that point, all bets are off. The natives fall back. They set the cabin on fire, and he's yelling that he wants to deal with them. The 2 men Englishmen who spoke, or white men who spoke English and French, sort of broker a deal, and they surrender. The deal is that they will be held captive and sold or traded back from the French to the British at some point. And he finds out at that point that one of the Indians had been shot, wounded, during that little gun battle. So they start marching down Woodcock Valley, back the way that Phillips and his men had come. Something happened, and Phillips and his son are separated from the rest of the men, and they're marched over to what's called Frankstown today. It was at the time called Astunapachla. From there, they're taken to Fort Detroit and then on up into Quebec City. As he's marching down the valley there, he hears his men starting to scream. They were tied to trees and they were tortured to death individually. Phillips would later find out that when Colonel Piper didn't hear from them, he rode into the valley a few days later and found black and bloated bodies. This was late summer, of his men. And the last, he said, you could tell the order. They said you could tell the order because the last man had pulled the rawhide thongs halfway through the bone of his wrist, trying to get away. It was a very brutal scene. So I was always puzzled because when I go there, I see a Native American man. The hair's pulled back, there's a hair lock, and there's feathers and things hanging out of it. And he's always very curious about me and will come forward and speak with me. So it took 17 years to get him on audio, 17. Every year it's an anniversary haunting, so you really only get lucky right around that month period. So every year for 17 years I went back, and then this one year I was talking to him and we were recording, and I asked him what he wanted me to know, and this was his answer.
You're the first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a 24 months in this party. I was like asking a knife to come show me.
What tells you the flies buzzing around? She's
Oh,
in the-
I'm in
no,
the
what that was,
mosquitoes,
yeah.
mosquitoes and stuff. You get bit up every time you go there. And then, if you want to play the prop one, this is the whole thing. So what I asked him was, and he said, Yankee's dead. And that's how I learned this. I went back to research it, and the French called them the Inglés. When the Iroquois Confederacy tried to translate English and give it Yankees, and that's how we got the word Yankee. It sort of got bastardized over time into that, so he was Yankees dead. And he was right, they were dead there.
Imagine being out in the woods, okay? It's dark. You're Patty. You try and get a recording, and all of a sudden, you hear this coming out. Oh, that's my career.
No, I was so excited, it wasn't even funny.
I'm kidding.
I was
That's
so
great.
excited.
That's,
And I was there with two other people for witnesses, just so you know, so I always require somebody to be with me as a witness. Because if I ever get a good EVP, which is that's the best one I ever had, I want somebody else to have seen it happen. There were other reporters going, none of them caught it.
so well, Sarah Estep, who started the American Association for EVP, gave us a classification A, B, and C. And that is without a doubt a class A. Some of the others are B, mainly because you have to play them over several times. But other than that, that's pretty much mostly what the best one we have. This one didn't come out quite as well on this. So, yeah.
Most of them, class A, I think, majority of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even me, it took a couple times to hear them, but I could figure it out.
You can hear the nervous, not you guys.
You know what, I have probably 1,000 DVDs, maybe more. And of course, I'm listening to them with earphones, and I've realized one thing, there is a lot of stuff that is just so quiet in them that it's really remarkable. None of these are retouched. We haven't done anything to any of these. It's just the way we got them. But to me, the EVP is very, very fascinating because you get some answers to questions.
You can't tell them. When they're answering the same question I'm asking, it's not chance. When they're carrying on a conversation, it's not chance, and it's much. I love the EVP, even though I write it myself, because it gives me a chance for you to experience it with me. So we talked about the reporter that came from Harrisburg. At the engine house one day, Mark and I were working with him, and we were talking to Tilly, and one of the gentlemen who works at the engine house full time had brought roses in and put them in a cup and said, "These are for you, Tilly, that morning, okay?" And she had shown me the roses, and he didn't know that, and neither did Mark. So I said to Mark, I said, ask her if she liked her gift and what was it. And so he started to, and the gentleman looked at me and said, "What will the answer be?" He tested me, and I whispered the answer in his ear. And when they played it back a few seconds later, you could hear, "Yes, roses."
I have to find it.
Remember that?
Yeah, I have to find it. I'm trying to go through, I'm trying to narrow all these down to an hour.
I learned never to put, I don't put just the dates on. I always put what the EVP says anymore because it's easier for me to find them later.
Yeah, and I started doing that too, but some of them
The old ones, yeah.
You have any questions?
I had talked to you before at the Bash a couple of years ago about the gentleman we saw go around town, the non-military, almost like a citizen watch person showed up.
Yeah.
And our group had split up, and we drove out, we were looking for a car or something like that, we couldn't find anything. And when we were talking about it, I mean, he only gave us specific orders, like, you know, you want to get out here before curfew because you won't pay the government any more than you have to. But then we found the other people who had walked out, because they were at the original placard before you redid it. And they told us that they had seen him too, and he commented to them about how many cars were going, how many people there were. But when they went to the road and stopped in the car and looked back, he was coming out.
Mhm.
But he had already come up to us by the 20th Main
Mhm.
and talked to us, which is like 100 yards. And he was like in his late 60s. So he came 200 yards by the time they went from the placard to the car. And so we went the following year, and we went the same spot, same time, and we're walking out. Allison's in the back, she's like, big camera, and we're coming out, and we saw this white light, like a flashlight, coming up through the path. And there was one big tree there, and went behind the tree, we didn't see any glow. But then, that was it, it just disappeared. So, I didn't know if you guys had any reports of something like that anywhere. It might not just be Little Round Top, it might be other places too.
Well, we did get that picture. I can't remember his name. Of the Warren statue, the civilian right next to it. Correct, yeah. Yeah, we do have a picture.
Is that the store?
Yeah,
Yeah, I see that one, yeah.
and that is a civilian. I mean, you know, he's got a duster, those long coats, like a sugar bowl.
But this guy had like a dry-cell flashlight, and yeah, but he had like flannel shirt or something. So, I mean, it was nothing, it was just like warning us to get out before the curfew.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I think I was the first one to bump into him as I was leaving the road. And he kept his head down. When he got almost right to me, he said, "There's an awful lot of cars around here." Meaning our group, maybe that's the way I thought. And I just said, "Yeah, but we're all very leaving, you know, we know what time." And he said, "Yeah, because they will find you." You know, and then, that's what we did. And he didn't say anything else, and I didn't think anything of it. And I got maybe 20 feet because I knew other friends of ours were right behind me. And I turned around, this guy is not there. He is gone. Because I could see my John and Alice, you know, coming up behind me. So I'm thinking, okay, he must somehow got past them already and went down further. And then we kept what he said. We kept hearing from each other down further, got bumping into this guy. There was no way this guy could have gotten from where I had first met him to disappear that quick. No way. I mean, this was no young sprint runner. You know, I mean, this was an old man. And it sticks with us every time we go out there. It's like, who was this? We were strangers.
And I think the weird thing was her nephew was with, and I was taking pictures through the night. And we were talking about this, and he said, yeah, he was there with us all night. We said, no, he wasn't. And he said, yeah, he was standing by the tree. And then they said, no, there was nobody by the tree. And I went back through my pictures, and right above her nephew's head is a big white ball of light. And he's the only one that saw him.
Oh, wow. So, okay. Yeah, so you had obviously.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, because I do know that for a while there, they had what they call VIP volunteers in the park,
Okay,
okay? But, I mean, you're describing, activity that they didn't hire them because they could appear and disappear,
yeah,
you know?
It's just something you
Like,
can't
they did
explain.
carry flashlights, but sometimes,
yeah.
but, you know, they didn't.
Yeah, that was our, like, we've had a couple, but that's our biggest,
Yeah,
like, unanswered thing about Gettysburg right now.
yeah, we could be here all night, but we're here listening to them.
Yeah, no, yeah, no. But I appreciate all this, this is great, I
Yeah,
love-
we weren't sure what we were gonna do today, we wanted to talk about our experiences, but then put this together and we're like,
Yeah.
let's do the EVP. And thanks for your help, your listening, and, you gave me insight on the
Yeah.
other one. It's a whole different voice though, you know? It's not like the other voices that you
It's a
hear.
female.
It's more,
You know-
it's tinny.
You know, I have a voice that sounds something like that from the school. You and me were in the library and
Oh.
it says, is that thing turned on?
Uh-huh.
We're thinking they're meaning the recorder,
Right,
but it has kind of like almost like an electronic,
yeah,
I can't
it's
explain.
almost tinny.
But it's a man's voice, it's a man's voice.
That sounded to me like a woman. I don't
That
know
sounds
what
like
you
a
did.
woman,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it did.
maybe
Yeah.
a nurse or something.
Yeah. No, I'll have to listen to that, change, maybe. Yeah. We had two women that lived in there at the time of the battle. It was, Andrew Woods owned the house, but he lived in Torrington. And then two women, a mother and a daughter, they married young. Both of them they married, lived in the house at the time. We know all about this because in the 1930s, 75th anniversary of the battle, the Civilian Conservation Corps, they had a bunch of writers like me, Patty, who were out of work. And so they hired them and had them go to historic places and interview people. The slave documents come from that. They interviewed a lot of ex-slaves. But these people came to Gettysburg and interviewed the people that had been there at the time of the battle 75 years before. And they interviewed the daughter. And one of the things that she said was that they had brought a wounded Union soldier, a young wounded soldier in, who'd been wounded in the hand. And they hit him in the attic where the Confederates go. And then they were stopped, you know, as the Confederates weren't leaving.
Yeah.
So the young woman created a ruse, maybe fainted or something, you know. Noble Confederates came over and helped her out. In the meantime, they got the wounded soldier down from the attic, down the stairs, which are still there, out onto the balcony, new balcony, and over to the next house, where there were no soldiers. But we know that story thanks to that. Well, thanks for stopping in.
Thank you.
Yeah. Glad you shared that story about the guy on the around town too.
Just as stressful thing I most ever had.
Yeah, it's just something that's bothers.
Or- Or it's just because we're honored.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When I first started coming to Gettysburg, my niece and I took your Balmer Street.
Patty,
Goes
the voice, the
Uh-huh.
EVP that
I remember
he
sat
played
across from
before
her
that,
in the store.
that is the same
And
female
my
voice.
niece was in front of me.
So if he
And I'm listening
takes
to the
it
tour
and,
guide, and
and
all of a sudden I
just
felt this tap
takes
on the
that
shoulder.
one
I
and
just said,
replays it,
okay,
because
because he was
he's
being very
looking for the
quiet,
male
just like
voice.
staring
so
straight
when
ahead.
you
And
hear
I'm looking at
back
him
to
like,
her voice,
really?
have him,